Hey, this is Stuart Rorer from Auritas, and today we're talking about SAP and data governance. And I am joined by Jon Simmonds, who is VP of Consulting Advisory Services from SimpleMDG, and David Boeckle, who's the CRO of Auritas. So let's jump right into it. Why has data quality become such a critical priority for organizations today?
Thanks, Stuart, and good to be with you. This is a question we quite often get, and actually, when you think about data quality and data governance and data management, the amount of data that's flowing through ERP systems, AI systems, data warehouses, data lakes, etc., in the modern era is quite phenomenal. And what we're starting to see now is and this has been a trend, over a few years. What we're starting to see is clients who have very complex reporting, governance requirements, especially now we're into the AI space. The outcomes from those, the investment that they've plowed into those requirements is just not there. And the reason it's not there is because the underlying data which supports those models is not clean, is not governed, is not accurate. And so what we're starting to see is some of those guys that have put in all of this effort, all of this estimations, everything else, is coming to the realization that the data platforms and the data that's on all of these supporting systems just needs to be cleaner, needs to be governed, needs to be managed, needs to be approved, needs to be accurate and timely. And that's where data governance comes in. So that's the real benefit that we start seeing from data governance. It's the pillars that hold up the rest of the data processes, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And again, you touched on several different pieces there, right? And maybe David, maybe we get you to expand a little bit more on maybe that AI readiness, and it's just really this combination of maybe how, what do companies need to do to prep for that AI piece, right? And even which ties into how do they build the business case? You think about hey, how are you getting started? How are companies building the business case and driving down this path?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Jon, as well. So I'll tell you that we've been presenting at quite a few SAP events over the last 3 months, educating end customers. And the word AI, if it doesn't come up 1,000 times in a session, it doesn't come up one time, right? And so people are talking about the technologies and the models and agentic AI and what they're trying to accomplish. And so I just asked the question and regarding the quality of their data, the state of their data, the maturity of their data governance and management, and the faces just turn white, right? And they're like, well, we don't have processes to have standardization, we don't have rules, and I said, so what are you really expecting to drive from this AI initiative? If you're investing the dollars in the technology and the process, to drive AI, but the data is bad, this project is going to be less than successful, right? I think the other part that I would kind of call out, I expect Sapphire to be, AI. That's what I expect this year, right? And so I think kind of tagging on to Jon's, elements, for me, it's about, it's about making sure that we've got great, clean, data to manage, AI against. And then it's also about making sure that we're avoiding, kind of, I'll call it leakage, profitability leakage due to, inferior master data quality.
I think if you allow me to add to that, David, just briefly.
Sure, absolutely.
So it's not an accident that SimpleMDG is put within the SAP BDC bag. And the reason for that is because BDC is the enabler for AI. It's the enabler for all of that data harmonization and everything else that you get big data exercises. Now, if you think about the AI business case and everything else, there's a ton of stuff around the AI. And what we should be thinking about is data as a whole from start to finish, journey from start to the journey to end, and AI encompassing all of that. And if you think about your AI exercise as getting the most out of your data, then why wouldn't you include MDG in that approach? And your point was a really good point, David, when you made about what's the cost of bad data. And I kind of see it as this classic 110, 100 rule. So $1 for preventing bad data costs you $1. $10 it'll cost you for correcting bad data, and $100 it will cost you for doing nothing. So really, when you think about a business case, it's not actually that difficult, you know.
And let me extend that, right? Because I think it's not, part of the discussions that I've been talking about have been prepping to go to the cloud. But as you're talking, John and David, like all the points you're making, when should customers, and I can make an argument, right, that you should be thinking about this if you're on ECC today and you don't even know when you're going to move, right? Yes, we've got that 2027 date that's sitting out there, but when should you start to think about data governance, right? And do I need to wait until I get, you hear, and there's different kind of thought processes, right? I've heard customers say, well, I want to wait until I move and then I'm going to deal with the problem. Again, as I've spoken before, you think about archiving, and the right time to do that is up front. Why would I want to move everything, right? As opposed to let me clean it and then I can move it. I find the same is true for data governance. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on that, right? So John, let's start with you and just kind of make this again a little bit of a roundtable type discussion. But right, what's your thoughts on when should people be thinking about data governance?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And now we're in this age of moving from ECC to S4, and a lot of transformation programs ongoing now. We get this question a lot. Should I go now? Should I govern the data now, or should I wait till I'm on my end, or till I'm in S4? And you're absolutely right. Why would you wait? Because if you think about it, do you want to go and restart all of that and start cleaning up data and governing data when you're already in S4? And we know that S4 transformation programs are not the easiest projects in the world, so it's another headache. And so for me, when I think about this, there's an easy argument to say clean your data, get it ready, and get it transformed when it's clean, and that's one. But for me, the more compelling argument is almost like putting a data governance process in place is like a three-legged stool, like people, process, and technology. Those three basic things. And the compelling argument for doing it early for me is it's just one less thing to do when you're live, because everyone knows when you go live on SAP on S4, there's going to be a lot of work in the first 6 months to a year when those new processes bed down and everything else. And that's just the way it is. So why would you not get that governance in place so that your processes are bedding down using good quality data, but also you don't have to put a new process in place because you've already done it. Your governance is already there. And the beauty of using a tool like SimpleMDG is you can establish that tool in your ECC system, and it's pretty seamless to move that over to S4. So you don't have to go through a re-execution of that project. It's already there. So it's not sunk cost that you're going to have to throw away. It's already there, and it's available with pre-configured templates. And I'll stop the sales pitch and let David chip in.
No, John, you kind of make me smile, right? I mean, you and I and some folks from SimpleMDG have had a lot of customer conversations, and that is the question that comes up with everybody that's on a RISE journey. Do I do it now or do I wait, right? The data models change in HANA as compared to ECC. We move away from customer vendor into business partner. There's some changes around AC DACA, right? We understand those things. And for us to have a very viable, path for a customer to implement on ECC and then, kind of move that into S4 with very, very little effort, has been eye-opening to, I'll say every single customer we've talked to. I've yet to have a customer say, yeah, okay, we'll wait and do this after the fact, for all the reasons that you mentioned, right? So I agree with you, and that's probably, Stuart, maybe you were listening to me in some conversations over the weeks because you picked up on the biggest question that customers tend to ask us.
Well, I want to double click, right? John kind of mentioned a piece of it in when he used the word process, right? So David, I'm going to start this question with you, and then I think it's going to translate over to product.
Hmm.
But again, when we think about customers that are doing a data governance activity, and again, whether that is using SAP's master data governance tool, whether they're using SimpleMDG, right? Does a tool simply solve the problem, right? Or is there more to it? Because again, we've all been in kind of the SAP ecosystem for years, and what I've seen is, customers implement a tool, and it takes them years to implement, and they never kind of finish, or once they do it, then they don't continue to execute, and data then stagnates again, and you're right back in the same problem. So maybe just kind of addressing, is it just a tool, right, or is there really more to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, for sure. So I think that, if you look at any project, and let's expand this beyond just MDG, right? Let's look at any transformational project. I think that there's a couple of things that kind of dictate your success that are true across, whichever technology you're implementing, right? So it's important to have, executive sponsorship and stakeholder alignment, engaged throughout the program, right? Whether we're, implementing technology 1, technology 2, technology 3, doesn't matter. We need that. The second piece is we have to have very strong, what I'll say, PMO, so project management office, to include organizational change management and training, right? Those are two things, that if you combine them, they probably dictate, 85% of our customers' success or lack of success, right? Or those two areas. So I think that when I look at it and I say, that we are kind of technology agnostic, it means that we've implemented multiple data governance solutions. And the technology itself, while helpful, right, isn't going to solve the problem for the customer. We have to look at business process, right? And I think, John, you'll probably agree with this and maybe elaborate, but we run into situations all the time where, a customer has highly customized, a business process. And sometimes it's because of a lack of understanding of, what's available out of the box with SAP. Sometimes it's dictated by, maybe a partner that they have or a third-party solution that's coming into the mix. But the process gets pretty convoluted, right? So we have to look at the process. We have to make sure that we have the right resources assigned and enabled for success within the organization, right? So that's really key, helping them set up the structure of the people. So again, you talk about the technology, and I think that's always the last piece, right? So we're confident we have the technology, but the people and the process and putting the people in the right spot and empowering them and defining their roles, and then making sure that we have that executive, leadership and sponsorship, combine that with business process, definition and adoption to more of standard. I think that those are probably the most important components. John, I'll kick it over to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, David. So when I think about the most successful of our customers, I think about what makes them successful. And if I work through, from the pre-sales process right through the implementation and their ongoing governance journey, I suppose the underlying thread with all of those successful customers is that they are open to changing their process and redefining their process and putting guardrails around their process. The most difficult projects are always when clients want to replicate their existing process in a new tool, because you know what they say. I mean, you can't, or well, you can, but you can't make a success of automating a bad process. It just doesn't seem to be any point in doing that. It's still going to be a bad process. It's just automated, and so therefore, those guys who are open to doing that understand that it is this three-legged stool, as I mentioned before. It's people, process, and technology. And without one of those being present, so without ownership of that data, without the commitment to simplification, standardization, all that kind of stuff, then you don't get the value out of the tool which it can provide. The tool can be the best tool in the world. If it's a bad process, it's still going to be a bad process. It just happens to happen a little bit faster, but your outcomes are just going to be the same. And so therefore, it is not just a product. We take our clients on a journey in combination with Auritas. You know, we rely very heavily on you guys for your experience, to bring that knowledge of data processing and transformation of processes together, along with the expertise that we provide with the tool, to deliver a real value business outcomes, not just a faster way of doing a bad process.
Yeah.
Well, and if I can, I'd love to have you expand, right? Because I think we talked about people, process, and I think that's really important. And again, you mentioned sort of not trying to replicate what you have, right? And being able to sort of utilize the best practices. And it's one of the things I think Auritas brings to the table, best practices from the people and the process, right? How we've done that. I think again, SimpleMDG brings to the table a technology that I think does things a little bit differently, right?
Yes.
And maybe Jon, if I can have you expand a bit on what the benefit, there's significant benefits for SimpleMDG. I'd love to have you kind of talk a little bit about that value prop on the technology side.
Yeah, right. So to talk a little bit about that, and a few of the main benefits that we see is organizations quite often pump a lot of resources into managing their data. A lot of that resource is pretty heavily reliant on IT in the past, and SimpleMDG has kind of flipped the script a little bit on that. So what we've seen, again, with some of our most successful clients, is that they have IT consultants, IT team members that work for them, who they can redeploy to other higher value activities, because we don't need that reliance on IT. And the reason for that is because SimpleMDG is 100% no code. So the learning curve is pretty shallow to start with, but secondly as well, the system itself can be maintained by business users. And that's really key, because it sets us apart from a lot of our competition. It cuts out that kind of way of, the whispering in one ear getting translated to something different when it goes to the next guy in IT. You don't need that anymore, because the business users are the ones that know the data, that understand the processes, that can then go straight into the system, and they can deploy automated business rules, workflows, templates, all that kind of stuff in minutes rather than weeks. And that's kind of the key benefits we see. And again, thinking back to that transformation journey from ECC to S4 is a classic example, because typically you're going from ECC to S4, even the ancillary systems that hang off at ECC is quite a big re-implementation project to make that move. SimpleMDG is not like that. We have pre-configured templates that can support that move. So really, it's just you think about moving from customers and vendors to business partners. That would traditionally be a big exercise for anything. You've still got that exercise to do in SAP, but you can be confident that your data governance tool in SimpleMDG will handle that seamlessly.
Yeah, David, maybe just have you extend a little bit, right? And it's one of the reasons why, from a services standpoint, I think Auritas has partnered with SimpleMDG to extend a lot of the value prop that Jon's talked about.
Yeah, it really is. And so maybe I'll just touch on very quickly 3 things there, right? So number one, Jon, you're absolutely right. I think we both have some customers, collective customers, where they want to take what they're doing with a homegrown application that they've had for 20 years and say, okay, I'm going to buy SimpleMDG, make it do what this one does, right? and the answer is, I'm not interested in that, because you're never going to get the value out of the tool. But let's talk to you about what a industry best practice process looks like, right? And a team structure. and where you would be missing out if you adopted your preferred approach. So we see that quite a bit. And you're right, the most successful customers are the ones that are saying, hey, you know what? I know I've got some uniqueness to me, but as a rule, I'm pretty straightforward. And so I'd love to see what best practice is and maybe adopt a little more than I currently am today, right? Help lead me. And that's, I think, where we thrive together. The second piece is, as we looked at the technology and the solution being built on the BTP platform, leveraging, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but leveraging, certain BTP services like integration suite, the event mesh, other, components. What we found is things are very repeatable, for customers. If we look at it, there's integrations that are available to, SAP applications. There's integrations that are available to non-SAP applications. So think of it as, if I have a user that's working in, Salesforce, I have another user that's working in a PLM system that happens to be non-SAP. I have everybody working in Outlook, and I have, people working in SAP, right? It allows us to have that single source of truth. We can kick off a process, for a change order or change request, through any of these particular environments. The event mesh actually, kind of broadcasts or federates that, content to all of the applications that are connected. That's really, critical. And then I think the one of the biggest things, again, because of how much SimpleMDG has innovated, right? And by the way, congratulations on the award, Jon, from
Thank you.
SAP, and I'm sure that'll be on display at Sapphire.
It will.
But the one thing that I would say is we've implemented, a lot of governance solutions for customers, and what we typically had found is that let's pick, one of the more challenging domains, certainly not the most challenging, but if we look at material, right? So it's not customer vendor, it's not, profit center accounting. I can tell you that, Stuart, when we were implementing, other solutions, it's not uncommon for that project to be 2+ years in duration to deploy, governance for material. And it's a very heavy lift, as Jon kind of indicated, from an IT perspective, right? Typically, it's a very heavy lift in terms of the deployment of the software and consulting fees, and the speed to value is really poor, right? I mean, think about it. You're not really getting value for almost 2 years, and some of these projects go longer. So as we were looking about, what's all this buzz about in the market, we looked at what made SimpleMDG different. And the key piece I would say is, we all realize the value and the power of the BTP platform, right? We also recognize, the value and the upside of, business data cloud as well, right? So we look at those two areas, and we see that's where SAP is investing, and that's, for many reasons. But as we look at integrations, as we look at workflows, as we look at, all of these different elements that are delivered, we're able to deliver, a material deployment in literally a very tiny fraction of what it would take to implement other solutions. So weeks, weeks versus years, right? Which is a big, benefit to a customer, right? We're able to see the value sooner. We're spending less money to do this, and we're able to move on to the next item, on our checklist. So just wanted to add that.
Excellent. And maybe just to close it off, right? The thing that we always see is companies want to know, how do I get started, right? What is the first step? And so maybe David, I'll start with you, and then John, if you want to come over the top a bit. But where should companies start? How should they engage with Auritas and SimpleMDG, and what should they be thinking?
Yeah. So I'll start us off, John, if that's okay with
Sure.
you.
Yeah, sure.
So, as we're talking to customers, they fall into one of two categories, primarily. So customers that are looking to move to S4, maybe S4 Rise, right? But they're looking to do an S4 transformation. And customers who are planning to stay on ECC until the last minute, right? So they're in one camp or the other. For most customers are realizing that at some point in time they're going to S4 and likely going to Rise. So that's where we're getting engaged with most of the customers early on. And one of the things that we do is we talk about a comprehensive data strategy, right? And so we talk about how do we handle data volume, right? With techniques like archiving and retention management to reduce the size of your transactional platform, which translates into a reduction in your overall project timeline and also SAP infrastructure and license fees, right? Which can be very substantial. I throw data governance in that same section of the project. I kind of call it the phase 0 stuff, right? So we throw data governance in there as well, because we want to get that data, evaluated first, cleaned if necessary, process built, tool there to automate, so that now we have everything clean, meeting a standard that we've set, meeting an industry best practice, and having the ability to actively govern data, master data moving forward, right? So that's where I see it coming in, and customers are very, very eager to have those conversations, especially when you can dispel the myth of how long it takes to deploy and how expensive the proposition is going to be. So again, I'll kind of concede the rest of my time to John for his thoughts on this, but that's what we're seeing every day, right, Stuart? So it's a great question.
Yeah, and I mean, mostly you've stolen my thunder, David. So I think I'm going to agree with you.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to agree with what you've said. And it comes back to that, and I'm going to talk about BDC story again. The overall data landscape from start to finish. So you can't get value out of BDC, all the BDC tools. You can't get value out of AI. You can't get anything out of your data until it's clean, accurate, governed, timely, all that good stuff, which data governance does. And data governance, let's be clear, it's always been a difficult conversation in the SAP space because it's always been difficult. Now, we purposely are a little bit controversial in calling our tool SimpleMDG, because we know that the data governance conversation is not a simple conversation to have. But what we're doing is we're making the execution of your business rules or of a company's business rules simple. And so, yes, we recognize that those conversations about redesigning processes, about best practices, all that kind of stuff are still difficult and could be time-consuming conversations. And they're important to get those conversations out in the open with your phase 0 approach and customers' phase 0 approaches. What we've done at SimpleMDG is make the back end of that, so the implementation, the execution of that as a technology, that's not a headache anymore. That's a simple conversation now. So in answer to your question, Stuart, where do you start? If I think about this, the obvious place for customers to start is in the conversations that David's been having with clients around, phase 0s and getting all the processes understood and getting that willingness to redesign and implement best practices. Once you've got that and you've got all of that willingness, you've got the phase 0 complete, the implementation of the software is not a big deal. Okay, so start with Auritas, finish with SimpleMDG. How easy can that be?
Really appreciate your insights on the series and you guys being able to participate and provide the background to lead in and or maybe finish off John's thoughts, right? yes, please reach out to us, right? What you're going to see and what I typically add into the post, right, is a link that you can click to connect with Auritas and also connect with SimpleMDG, right? Reach out to us. As I've mentioned before, we're both, both partnerships have been tied into SAP-based BTP and BDC roadshows that have been going across both North America and Canada. And then if we've talked about a little bit, both partners will be at Sapphire. We absolutely want to connect with you there and have these conversations, right? So it's a bit of a self-serving kickoff to ask that question, right? Where do you get started? The best place to get started is to talk to one of us and help you walk through where are you in the journey and how are you going to, how do you get to the next spot? So again, please, as I've asked you to do before, follow the post, follow the activity, leave comments on the post, and please reach out to us, and we look forward to connecting with you again, both individually and at hopefully at Sapphire. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Owen.